Christmas used to be my favorite time of year. I can still picture it. The scent of pine needles and cinnamon, the sound of my children's laughter echoing through the halls. It was a time for warmth, for family, for belonging. But somewhere along the way, that all faded. Over the last 5 years, Christmas transformed from a season of joy into a stark reminder of my own loneliness. It started slowly. The first year, my children wanted to spend Christmas just as a couple. I understood, or at least I told myself I did. The second year, they were traveling with friends. I smiled and wished them a wonderful trip, while my own heart felt heavy. The third year, they just forgot to invite me. The silence was deafening. By the fourth year, all I got was a text message. 2 words that felt like they were typed by a stranger. Merry Christmas, no call, no visit. Just a notification on my phone that felt more like a goodbye than a greeting. But the 5th year, that was the year that broke me. Christmas morning arrived, and with it, a picture message. It was a photo of them, my children, my grandchildren, all gathered around a magnificent Christmas tree in a cozy cabin. The kids were in matching pajamas, their faces beaming. Snow was falling gently outside the window, blanketing the world in a pristine white pae. They looked so happy, so complete, and there was no mention of me, no space for me in that perfect little frame. It was a beautiful family portrait that screamed one thing: I was not part of their family anymore. Not in the way that mattered. That day I sat alone at my kitchen table. I'd set a single plate, a single cup, and lit a single candle, clinging to a sliver of hope that had long since burned out, and I sobbed. I cried for the daughter who was once my best friend, for the son who used to call me every day. I cried for the grandchildren whose laughter I only heard in old voicemails. I cried until the candle flickered out, and I kept crying right through to the new year. That was the year I finally understood I was no longer a part of their Christmas story. So this year, I decided to write my own. I wasn't going to spend another holiday waiting for an invitation that would never arrive. I wasn't going to let my happiness depend on a phone that wouldn't ring. This year, I did something for me. This year, I bought a mountain house. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A mountain house. It sounds extravagant, but let me explain. I've worked my entire life as a seamstress. My fingers know the feel of thread and fabric better than anything else. For decades, I squirreled away every spare dollar. It was my memory fund, I called it. Money I'd saved for family vacations we never took, for big celebratory dinners that never happened. I finally realized I was the only one holding onto those dreams. They had moved on, and it was time for me to do the same. So, one crisp autumn morning, I made a decision. I packed a small bag with a few essentials, filled up the tank of my trusty old car, and just started driving. I didn't have a solid plan, just a destination in mind. A snowy mountain town I'd visited once with my late husband years ago. A place where the air was clean and the stars felt close enough to touch. The drive was long hours and hours on winding roads that twisted and turned like the doubts in my own mind. Was I being foolish? Was I running away? Part of me screamed to turn back, to go back to the familiar ache of my empty house. But another part, a quieter, stronger voice, urged me forward. With every mile I put between myself and my old life, I felt a little lighter. And then I saw it. As I rounded a bend in the road, there it was, nestled amongst a grove of tall pine trees. A beautiful wooden house, its roof blanketed in a soft layer of fresh snow. A stone chimney stood proudly, promising warmth and comfort within. The trees stood like ancient loyal guards, protecting this little pocket of peace. It looked like a postcard, a scene straight out of a dream I didn't even know I had. A real estate agent was there to meet me. She was kind, and she started talking about square footage and property lines, but her words were just a gentle hum in the background. My heart was speaking much louder. As I stepped onto the porch and looked out at the majestic snow-covered peaks, one clear thought settled over me. This will be home, not a house filled with echoes of missing voices. Not a space defined by absence and waiting, just home, a place to start again. When I signed the papers, my hand barely trembled. For the first time in years, I wasn't making a decision based on anyone else's needs or wants. This wasn't for them. This was for me. I walked through the empty rooms, the sound of my footsteps echoing on the wooden floors. It wasn't an empty sound, though. It was the sound of a new beginning. I could already picture it. A fire crackling in the fireplace, the scent of baking bread filling the air, and maybe, just maybe, a Christmas tree standing in the corner decorated not with old memories of what was, but with new hopes for what could be. The first few weeks were a blur of activity. I scrubbed floors, painted walls, and spent hours in the local shops, picking out furniture that felt like *me*. I bought a big, comfortable armchair to put by the window, a sturdy wooden table for the kitchen, and a quilting frame, ready for all the new stories I would stitch into fabric. Slowly, the house started to feel less like a structure and more like a sanctuary. I started exploring the small town too. At first, I was shy, keeping to myself, but the people here, they're different. The woman at the bakery learned my name by my third visit. The man at the hardware store gave me tips on how to keep my pipes from freezing. I joined a local quilting circle, a group of women whose laughter and shared stories warmed me more than any fireplace. We'd sit for hours, our needles flying, sharing patterns, recipes, and pieces of our lives. They didn't know my whole story, but they didn't need to. They saw me not as someone's forgotten mother, but as a new friend. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. This year, there was no knot of anxiety in my stomach. No compulsive checking of my phone. Instead, I put on some old holiday music, lit a fire, and decorated a small, fragrant pine tree I'd bought from a local farm. I adorned it with simple, handmade ornaments, little stars I'd sewn from scraps of felt, and pine cones I'd collected on my walks. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow across the snow, I sat in my new armchair with a cup of hot tea. I looked around at my little house, at the twinkling lights on my tree, at the peaceful world outside my window. There were no children's stockings hung on the mantel. There were no presents from my son or daughter under the tree. But for the first time in 5 years, my house didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of peace, full of potential, full of me. My phone did buzz that evening. It was a text. "Merry Christmas, Mum." This time, the words didn't sting. They were just words. I simply replied, "Merry Christmas to you too," and then I put my phone away. I had a new tradition to start. My quilting friends and I were having a Christmas morning potluck. My contribution, a freshly baked apple pie. My heart was full, not with what I had lost, but with everything I had found. Loneliness had been my unwelcome guest for so long, but here, in this mountain house, I had finally shown it the door. This was my home now, and this was my Christmas. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's a journey, and I'm glad to have you with me. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to share a story with you, a story about finding light in the darkest of winters and rediscovering joy when you feel forgotten. It's a story that I hope resonates with anyone who has ever felt like an afterthought. Imagine this: the mountain air is so cold it bites, but in a good way. The kind of cold that shocks you awake after years of feeling numb. That's where our story begins. In a small cabin nestled in the quiet of the mountains, a woman was creating a Christmas just for herself. She had spent years feeling like a ghost in her own life, especially after her husband passed away. But this year, something was different. She decided not to wait for an invitation that might never come. Instead, she packed her bags and escaped to a place where she could finally hear her own thoughts. She decorated the living room of her rented cabin with her own hands. Warm, twinkling string lights were draped over the wooden beams. A tall, fragrant Christmas tree stood proudly in the corner, adorned with ornaments she'd made herself, each one a small, tangible piece of her own effort. She spread a soft, plush blanket by the stone fireplace, creating a cozy nest for herself. In the kitchen, the sweet smell of chocolate filled the air. She whisked a pot of rich, dark hot chocolate, and out of a habit etched deep into her heart, she poured 2 cups, one for her and one for her husband. His cup sat on the small table, untouched, but its presence was a comfort, not a sorrow. It was a symbol of love that still lived on. She settled by the fire, mug in hand, watching the flames dance and chase away the shadows. A strange and wonderful sense of peace washed over her. She was alone, yes, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she didn't feel lonely. This little cabin, this solitude, wasn't a reminder of abandonment. It was a promise. A promise of self-love, a commitment to rebuilding her own happiness from the ground up. She was starting to feel whole again, piece by piece. But just as this newfound peace began to settle in her heart, the outside world tried to break through it. One evening, a familiar sound shattered the tranquil silence. Her phone buzzing on the wooden table. A message. It was from her daughter, Rachel. The text read, "Hey Mum, are you coming for Christmas this year? We assumed you were busy last time." The words hit her like tiny, sharp icicles. Asterisk assumed. Asterisk, asterisk, busy. Asterisk, she hadn't been busy. She had been waiting. Waiting for a call, for a real invitation. But she had been forgotten. She stared at the message, the warmth from the fireplace suddenly feeling distant. She didn't reply. A minute later, another message from Rachel popped up. "We're having the family over. You can come by after dinner. Asterisk after asterisk dinner. After the main event." After the shared laughter and the family traditions she used to cherish. After the memories were made and the family photos were taken. She was being invited to the leftovers of their Christmas joy. An afterthought. Then her son Mark messaged her. "Mum, hope you aren't alone again. Come over if you want. But it's kind of full here. Asterisk if you want. Asterisk, asterisk, kind of full." Asterisk, the words were meant to sound casual, maybe even caring, but they felt like crumbs of affection being tossed her way. Her chest tightened. A familiar ache spread through her. For 5 long years, she had received these half-hearted invitations, these excuses. 5 years of feeling like a burden, an inconvenience. But then the fireplace crackled loudly, a sudden bright spark catching her eye, and in that flicker of light she remembered the warmth she had been building asterisk inside asterisk herself, the peace she had found in her own company, the strength she had cultivated in her solitude. Suddenly, with a clarity that was both startling and empowering, she knew she no longer wanted a seat at a table where her presence wasn't valued. She no longer wanted to squeeze into a space where she had to justify her existence. She picked up her phone, turned it over, and placed it face down on the table. The screen went dark. No reply. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was powerful. It was her choice. She was choosing herself. And then came Christmas morning. The sunlight streamed through the window, hitting the fresh snow and making it glitter like millions of tiny diamonds scattered across the forest floor. The world outside was pristine, quiet, and beautiful. Inside, she was creating her own celebrations. She went into the kitchen and made pancakes, but not just any pancakes. She made them in the shape of stars, topping them with a handful of bright red berries and a dusting of powdered sugar. She sat at her little wooden table, the one set for one, and savored every single bite. It was the most delicious breakfast she'd had in years. Then she did something she hadn't done before. She had wrapped a gift and placed it under her little tree. A gift for herself. She carefully untied the ribbon and opened the box to reveal a soft, beautiful wool sweater. As she pulled it on, it felt warm, comforting, like a hug she hadn't felt in years. A hug she was giving herself. She put on some old music, the classic holiday tunes her husband and she used to dance to in their tiny living room, long ago when the kids were small. She swayed gently to the rhythm, a smile gracing her lips. And as the music played, she walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered pines. She whispered into the crisp winter air, "Merry Christmas, my love, I'm learning to celebrate again." And she smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. It wasn't a smile of pretending or of making do. It was a smile accessorios de pure, unadulterated peace. She had discovered that the greatest gift she could ever receive was the one she gave herself, the permission to be happy on her own terms. She wasn't just surviving Christmas alone, she was thriving. This story is a powerful reminder that our value does come from the invitations we receive or the space others make for us. It comes from within. It's about building a home within yourself that is so warm and welcoming, you never feel truly alone. It's about choosing your own peace over a chaotic and hurtful seat at someone else's table. If you've ever felt this way, please know you are not alone in that feeling. And more importantly, you have the power to create your own joy. Thank you so much for listening and spending this time with me. If this story touched you, I'd be so grateful if you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. The old pine trees groaned under the weight of fresh snow, their branches heavy like old memories. The cabin, small and tucked away in the quiet of the woods, felt like a secret whispered by the winter wind. Inside, a fire danced in the hearth, its warm glow painting the log walls with flickering light. I sat in my rocking chair, a patchwork quilt draped over my lap, watching the flames and listening to the crackle and pop. This was peace, a peace I hadn't known in years. My peace, my life used to be. Louder, full of ringing phones that I was always expected to answer, and a big empty house that echoed with the absence of my family. For years, I was the reliable one, the emergency contact, the last-minute babysitter. But when the emergencies passed, so did the phone calls. Holidays became just another day marked on the calendar. My birthday cake was often eaten alone. I'd see their lives unfold on social media, lavish vacations, boisterous parties, new cars in shiny driveways. I'd scroll through photos of my grandchildren growing up, their smiles frozen on a screen, and my heart would ache with a loneliness so deep it felt like a physical weight. I wasn't a part of their world anymore. I was just a spectator, an afterthought. It was the 5th Christmas in a row spent in that hollow silence. The grand dining table, which once seated a dozen laughing faces, was covered with a dust sheet. I had bought presents, wrapped them in cheerful paper, and placed them under a small, lonely tree. They remained there unopened long after the holidays had passed. That was the turning point. A quiet click in my soul. I realized I was waiting for an invitation that would never come from people who had forgotten how to extend one. I was waiting for them to remember me, and in that waiting, I was forgetting myself. So I stopped waiting. I sold the big, empty house that held more ghosts than memories. I packed the things that mattered: my late husband's favorite armchair, a box of faded photographs, and the patchwork quilt my own mother had made. I found this little cabin nestled deep in the woods, far from the city's noise and its casual neglect. Here, the silence wasn't hollow, it was full. Full of the sound of the wind, the rustle of unseen creatures, and the steady, comforting beat of my own heart. I learned to chop my own wood, to tend a small garden in the summer, and to find joy in the simple rhythm of the seasons. I was no longer just a mother or a grandmother. I was me. Then, sometime around noon today, I heard it. The unfamiliar sound of car tires crunching in the snow. A sound that didn't belong in my newfound quiet. I peeked through the frosted window pane. A fancy SUV, its chrome gleaming against the white landscape. And then they stepped out. My children, my grandchildren, confusion etched on their faces, their city coats looking absurdly out of place against the rugged pines. They looked surprised, almost offended, as if my peace was an inconvenience to them. Rachel, my daughter, knocked first, a hesitant, uncertain rap. "Mum, what are you doing here? We went by the house. It's empty. Why didn't you tell us you were here?" Her voice was laced with an accusation I knew all too well. I opened the door just enough to block the entrance, letting a sliver of warm, pine-scented air escape into the cold. I looked at her, then at my son, Mark, who stood behind her, his brow furrowed in a frown. I answered calmly, my voice steady. I moved. Mark stepped forward, moved. Without telling us. The disbelief in his voice was thick. I let my gaze settle on him. I mean, I really looked at him, not as the boy I raised, but as the man he had become. "Mark," I asked, my voice soft but clear, "when was the last time you called just to ask how I was? When did you last ask where I spent Christmas? Or how I felt when I saw your family photos, and I wasn't in any of them?" A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by the whistling wind. The grandchildren, bundled in their snowsuits, looked from their parents to me. Their little faces filled with a confusion that mirrored their parents'. They didn't understand. How could they? I stepped out onto the small porch, the cold air sharp against my face. "For 5 years," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of every lonely night, every unanswered text. "For 5 years I waited. I waited for a call, a visit, a sign that you remembered I existed. I celebrated holidays with ghosts of memories, hoping you might show up. Rachel's eyes, usually so sharp and busy, softened with a flicker of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Remorse, maybe. "Mum, we didn't mean to," she began, her voice trailing off. "But you did," I interrupted, not with anger, but with the simple finality of a truth that had been accepted. "You did, and for a long time I let it hurt me. I let it shrink my world until all that was left was the space you forgot to fill. But not anymore." I gestured to the cabin behind me, to the smoke curling from the chimney. "This is my world now." They stood there, shuffling their feet on the packed snow. The children, sensing the tension, clung to their parents' legs. The winter chill was starting to seep into their expensive coats. They were finally feeling the cold I had lived with for so long. Can we come inside?" Mark asked, his voice hesitant. It was a question born of habit, of expecting my door to always be open to them. I shook my head, a slow, deliberate movement. No. The word felt strange on my tongue, powerful. It's Christmas Day, and for the first time in a very long time, my home is filled with peace. I won't break it. Not for you, not for anyone. Not again. They weren't used to hearing the word no from me. I was the eternal yes. "Yes, I'll watch the kids. Yes, I'll lend you money. Yes, I'll be here." Their faces registered shock, then a dawning, uncomfortable understanding. Rachel's voice cracked, and a tear traced a path down her cold cheek. "Mum, please, we're sorry. We want to make things right." I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath of the crisp, clean air. It felt like I was exhaling years of pain, of quiet desperation, of feeling invisible. When I opened them, my resolve was firm. Making things right isn't a Christmas Day project, Rachel. It's not a quick visit to ease your guilt. It takes time. It takes effort. The kind of effort you haven't been willing to give. I looked at my grandchildren, their innocent eyes watching me. My heart ached for them, but I knew this was necessary. "I love you," I said to them, and then I looked back at my children. "But love doesn't mean my door is a revolving one you can walk through whenever you feel like it. My peace is not a convenience. You need to understand that." I stepped back inside, into the warmth. "Go home," I said, my voice gentle but final. "Be with your family, and maybe think about what family really means. It's more than a holiday visit. It's showing up when it doesn't benefit you. It's remembering it. When you've had time to truly think about that, you'll know how to find me. But today, this day is mine." I closed the door, not slamming it, but shutting it with a quiet click that echoed the one that had happened in my soul. I leaned against the sturdy wood, listening as their surprised murmurs faded, followed by the sound of the SUV's engine starting and then disappearing down the snowy track. The silence returned, but this time it was sweeter. The fire was still dancing, the quilt was still warm, and my heart was finally, beautifully, at peace. Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content that explores the quiet, powerful moments of life. Take care of yourselves and remember to check in on the ones you love. Not today, I answered. Today is my Christmas, my healing. My turn. Their faces fell, a cascade of surprise and disappointment. But for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I didn't feel a single pang of guilt. I didn't feel the familiar sting of being an afterthought. I just felt whole. They drove off slowly, their tires leaving dark tracks in the fresh white snow, but this time they left no marks on my heart. I closed the heavy wooden door, the click echoing in the quiet mountain house. It was a sound of finality, a sound of a new beginning. I walked back to the living room, to the crackling fireplace that had become my trusted companion. The warmth wrapped around me as I curled back into my soft, plush blanket. Picking up my mug, I sipped the rich, warm chocolate, the sweetness a gentle comfort. I just stared into the mesmerizing dance of the flames orange, yellow, and blue, and I smiled again, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. Maybe next year, maybe someday, we could rebuild it. The thought floated gently, without the usual weight of desperation. Maybe we could find a new way forward, build new bridges over the chasms of hurt, but this year was unequivocally, unapologetically mine. Not a year to be forgotten in an empty house, waiting for a call that might never come. Not a year to be replaced by others' last-minute plans, slotted in like a forgotten appointment this year. I chose myself, and in making that choice, in claiming this time for my own healing, I finally found joy again. It wasn't a loud, boisterous joy. It was quiet, steady, and deeply rooted, like the ancient pines standing guard outside my window. Many people believe that Christmas is only perfect when the room is overflowing with family, a noisy, chaotic, beautiful mess. We see it in movies, we hear it in songs. It's the ideal we're all supposed to chase. But I learned something incredibly powerful this year, a truth that settled deep in my bones. Peace is so much better than company that hurts you. True, profound peace is a gift you give yourself, and it's more precious than any present under a tree. I also learned that self-respect is better than forced tradition. For years I had bent myself into pretzels, trying to fit into a family picture where I was always on the edge, slightly out of focus. I followed traditions that left me feeling hollow, participating in rituals that no longer held any meaning for me, only pain. Breaking away from that wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of survival. It was choosing my own well-being over the empty performance of togetherness. And the most important lesson of all, love begins with yourself first. It's not selfish, it's essential. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and my cup had been bone dry for far too long. For 5 Christmases, my family had left me behind. 5 years of quiet holidays, of staring at my phone, of pretending it didn't hurt. 5 years of feeling like a ghost in my own life during the most wonderful time of the year. But this year, I decided to give myself a gift that couldn't be bought in a store all wrapped in shiny paper. It was the gift of a mountain house nestled in the serene embrace of snow-covered peaks. It was the gift of a warm fire, its flames a constant, comforting presence. And most importantly, it was the gift of a heart that finally knows its worth. A heart that understands it deserves peace, it deserves joy, it deserves to be the main character in its own story. And that is the happiest Christmas I have ever had. It's a Christmas filled not with the sound of a crowd, but with the sound of my own peaceful breath. It's a Christmas decorated not with tinsel and lights, but with self-love and newfound strength. If you've ever felt left behind or forgotten, especially during the holidays, please know that you have the power to create your own joy, to build your own traditions, and to give yourself the gift of a Christmas that truly heals your soul. Thank you so much for sharing this quiet moment with me. If this story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world. I wish you peace, warmth, and a heart that knows its incredible worth.